Welcome to our event, Women in Science and Health, Creating a Legacy. My name is Wendy Walbach. I'm the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs, and I'm going to be moderating today's event. The purpose of today's event is to feature a panel of CSH faculty and staff women to discuss the importance of a female mentor in shaping pursuits in career and in life. And just for those attendees who might wish to speak later, we wanted to let you know that the event will be recorded. And so if you wish to opt out of speaking, you may do so. So this is how the event will unfold. So I will introduce our panelists one by one and ask each to speak for a couple minutes to talk about their stories and their experiences and their path to their current positions. I'm going to be asking the panelists a series of questions so they can further talk about some of their stories. And then at the end of the period, we're going to have a Q&A. So if you have any questions that arise, please put them into the chat and we'll try to address as many of those questions at the end of the hour as we can. So we'll start with introductions. I'll first introduce our Dean, Stephanie Dance Barnes, Dean of College of Science and Health.
Hey, I guess is it morning or afternoon? Losing track of time. But it's so wonderful to be here today. I'm excited about the opportunity to be a part of a panel with some wonderful women in science and health, and to discuss our journey and hopefully share our experiences that would impact and influence others. Just for myself, my journey began in a small town in Elizabeth City, North Carolina on the coast. And I was very determined not to stay in that small area very long. But through various experiences and opportunities, I actually made the decision to stay in Elizabeth City for my undergraduate education. Once I was exposed to some of the wonderful faculty and learning opportunities that were offered there through summer school. I was in high school and there was this opportunity to take summer school classes. And so that was my really big exposure to a historically Black college and university in that small nurturing environment. And so from there, I then went on to graduate school, which was very interesting because by the time I was making those determinations, I had a very young family. And so that kind of changed my trajectory some. And so I made the decision that I wanted to go the research track. And so that led me to another institution in North Carolina, North Carolina A&T State University, where I received my master's in biology and had my first experience with a mentor that was actually a woman in science. And it actually gave me a lot of perspective on the type of scientist I wanted to be and that I did not want to be. I then went on to pursue my doctoral work at Wake Forest University School of Medicine in the area of cancer biology and toxicology. And that is where I probably really decided that I wanted to stay on the research track. I really thought I was going to end up in maybe a drug development setting because at the time my focus was lung cancer. But I had the wonderful opportunity to do my postdoctoral work at UNC Chapel Hill at the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center, which is where I was introduced to Charles Peru, and we did some really great work with triple negative breast cancer. And that's where I really became convinced that part of my journey and part of my contribution to science would be to address disparities as it relates to breast cancer and also bringing other women to the table as it relates to that journey. So I'll stop there and turn it over to the other ladies.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Patty Ariola Lozano, who is the Associate Director of Graduate Student Services.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Patty. So I am from Chicago, born and raised. I grew up and still live in the Little Village neighborhood, a primarily Mexican-American immigrant community. I am a product of the Chicago Public Schools. I attended elementary school and high school in CPS. I then went on to DePaul for my undergrad, where I majored in communications. I'm not in science, but I do work with science students, and what I do is a form of science, if I may say so myself. But I did graduate from DePaul with my undergrad. I went on to the workforce for a few years. I worked in a couple of places. I worked in the National Immigrant and Justice Center for a few years as a paralegal. So I got a chance to get a taste of that. And then worked at another university in the state of Illinois. And then found my way into the master's program at DePaul in counseling, and I concentrated in higher education. And that's how I found my way back to DePaul, working with students. And I always had a kind of that need to help people. And I see that in a lot of the students that I work with. It's like, how can I help people? And there's so many different ways. And this is the way that I found that I could help people, students. But yeah, so that's just a little bit about me. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Patty. Our next panelist is Lavone Robinson, who's professor of psychology.
Well, hi, I'm Lavone, and it's an honor to be here today with all of you. So thank you for inviting me. I've been at DePaul since 1980. I am a faculty member in the Department of Psychology. And I'm from Georgia. I'm a Georgian. So, I won't be long-winded. I mean, at some point, I think we'll probably be very interactive and we can discuss more.
Okay. Our next panelist is Quinetta Shelby, who is Associate Professor of Chemistry and Chair of the Chemistry Department.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on this panel with all these awesome women. Let's see, I am born and raised in Chicago. I grew up in the projects, and my mom really stressed the importance of education, and her children took that very seriously. I won't go into too many details about that, but I ended up going to the University of Chicago for my undergrad. And it was there that I started off as a math major, but I was struggling in calculus. And at the same time, I was getting very, very interested in chemistry because I had an awesome chemistry professor. And it was not until around my junior year that I got involved in research. And that's because one of my professors, N.C. Yang, pulled me aside and told me about a graduate school fair. I went, and before that moment, I thought that I would be a high school math teacher, but then chemistry teacher when I switched my major. But then it was that moment that he planted the seed that I could actually be, sorry, my lights. I could actually be a college professor and by earning a PhD. And so I applied, and then I went to the University of Urbana-Champaign. And honestly, I did not have, at the college level, I did not have a female professor. When I was in my PhD program, I still did not have a female professor, but I spent a lot of time in the NMR lab. And the manager for the NMR lab, who knew everything about NMRs, all kinds of NMRs, was a woman, or is a woman, and she happened to be my PhD advisor's wife, so Vera Maines. And she became, I believe, my first female science mentor. I ended up leaving there and going to work for John Hardwig for my postdoc. And there I met a lot of very interesting people. So it was, I had been in Illinois all my life until I went to my postdoc over in Connecticut. And I was exposed to a lot of different people and a lot more women in science. And I met more Black women in science on the East Coast. And then I came here back to Chicago. I was at Chicago State for a few years, and then I came to DePaul. And I am very proud to say that two of my mentors, my female mentors, are here. One is a panelist, Margaret Siliker, and the other one is Lynn Narasimhan. So I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you, Quinetta. Okay, so our next panelist is Margaret Siliker. She is professor and chair of biology.
Well, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to be on this august panel. I prepared a little bit differently for this, but I'm going to wing it. I was born in the city of Chicago and grew up in the Chicago suburbs of Park Forest. But my parents were California natives. And so my last year of high school, we moved to California, and the high school wasn't as good as the public school that I went to here. And so I ended up taking gym and government, which was my requirement to graduate, and got a job working at a plant nursery. And this is when everybody was, talking to their plants and things like that. And I got really interested in plants and growing plants, and worked for a year after high school at the plant nursery and became a certified California nursery man. And then thought, okay, this is getting kind of boring. So I was accepted into a program in agriculture at University of California at Berkeley, and realized on my first day of college that I hadn't registered for any classes. And so I had to scramble to find classes at this big university to be in, just to maintain my status, and signed up for a non-majors biology class called Molds and Man. And started my lifelong love and appreciation for fungi. And as a non-majors class, it talked about the biology of these organisms and how it had implications for history. That's why Britons are tea drinkers, and for society. Then as I went on, I realized that these organisms that I love were just amazing model systems for understanding genetics and molecular biology. I have to say that most of my mentors have been, through my college years, were male, although Elizabeth Blackburn was on my Nobel laureate, was on my thesis committee and literally read my thesis when she was in the delivery room. So I want to thank her for that. And, I also feel that my mentors are here. Quinetta Shelby is a mentor to me, as well as is Lynn Narasimhan. And yeah, that's my story.
Thank you, Margaret. Our final panelist is Amanda Story-Ward, who is the Assistant Director of College Operations.
Hi, everyone. Like Wendy said, I'm Amanda, and I'm the Assistant Director of Operations, but I'm also the Chair of Diversity, Mission, and Inclusion on Staff Council. I am an adopted Southerner, sort of. I moved around a lot as like for the first half of my life because my dad was in the Army. But my parents, who were from Nevada and California, decided to settle in North Carolina. And that's where I lived the most time of any place I lived. So it's home. I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill with my bachelor's degree in 2013 and ended up in Chicago on a whim. And I've been at DePaul for just over 5 years now. And I finished my master's in public administration here last year. One of the interesting things about science and my background is that at UNC, I was a chemistry major after I tutored chemistry for 3 years in high school. But I quit because it was unlike DePaul in a lot of ways. We had 400-person lecture classes and it wasn't awesome. And professors didn't show up to their office hours, which is, again, not like DePaul. So I quit. But I did find faculty who were interested in what I had to say and the research I wanted to do. And so I ended up studying social and economic justice and women's and gender studies. And so those experiences definitely inform how I make suggestions for policy in the college and when I try to make changes at the university level. And so I'm not a scientist, but I deeply love science. And I like making it better here for all of you.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, I'd like to ask a series of questions of our panelists. And I'd like to start by, and some of you touched on some of this, but I'd like to start by asking what you think one of the biggest obstacles has been that you faced, how you faced it, and especially if it's been a while since this took place, if you had to do it over again, would you do anything differently? Stephanie, would you like to start out?
Well, I thank you for throwing it to me prepared because my heart was just so full listening to all the just introductions. So I can't imagine how I'm going to feel after we get some of the responses to some of these questions. But for me, the biggest obstacle has been overcoming finding a balance. Coming from a background where you are a woman of color, you sometimes feel as if you have to work extra hard, even harder than everyone else in the room, and probably put in more time and hours and effort than is probably physically or mentally acceptable. And so I think finding that balance, and I know people say work-life balance, and we talk about that a lot, but it is absolutely true. And what I've definitely learned over the years is that it's important to definitely take care of yourself, because you can't show up for others if you aren't taking care of yourself. I also think an obstacle has been, which was kind of alluded to earlier, I did have exposure to one female mentor in graduate school, but her idea of what a scientist should be, especially a female scientist, was very different than what I thought. I felt that I could be a wife, a mom, a researcher, a teacher, like I could do it all. And for me, it was coming out of some of those experiences was that I understood the necessity of finding diverse mentors that, and I mentioned this before, that teaches me or taught me how I wanted to be and how I didn't want to be, and how I can best support all types of students. And so I do think, and I believe I have developed this I can do it all attitude, because I believe you can, maybe not all at one time, but by working smart and surrounding yourself with good people with like values and understanding who you are, I think that you can achieve a lot of those goals. But back to your question, obstacles, making sure that I had accessible female mentors, which was very difficult. and then also that work-life balance.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to tackle the question?
What I would add is my obstacle, the biggest one, has been deciding to do things my way. So I think that, growing up, there's some expectations, I'm a girl, I'm not supposed to be, interested in science, right? What's wrong with you, kind of thing. And then, add other components of me to that. And then, after I achieve that accomplishment, then there are other expectations. So I think the largest hurdle that I've had to jump over is just deciding for me that I'm going to do things my way. This is me, and this is how I want to live my life.
I'll jump in if that's okay. So I think for me, and it still happens all the time, my insecurities are obstacles. Growing up, I didn't have, like my parents are immigrants. So I'm a first generation college student. I am the youngest of my siblings, but still in a way I had them to look up to, but I didn't have people to look up to in a way, right? So I sometimes find myself like, do I belong here? Or, should I be saying something? I always kind of go back to being that insecure little girl. And those are I think sometimes what I have to fight against, and the obstacles that I face. And I just have to, find my voice and like try to speak up in any way that I can, even if it's, and I don't want to say but like interrupting, because I also struggle with that, like interjecting myself into meetings or into places. So that's what I've had to overcome. And I'm working on it. I still work on it, and I worked on it before. So it's something that's ongoing.
Thank you. Lavone, yes.
Yeah, so I would say, and I know it's all about women here, but, women are different in how they understand themselves. And, I've always understood myself to be an African-American, and then woman second, because I am convinced that when people see me, the first thing they see is an African-American. I'm convinced that the first thing they see is my dark skin, and then they understand that I am a female. And so then they start factoring in how they're going to react to me, being a Black female, and that influences how I react to them. And so I would say, in a society like today's society, the largest obstacle to my success has been racism. And that obstacle still remains. I think what's important for any person of color, an African-American, I know most about, is how you cope with that. And, I've had many friends, I've had many mentors, but I tell you, the most important and pivotal people in my life to prepare me was my grandmother and my mother. So that's my story. And, as I said, I'm a Southerner. And as you can see, I'm a Southerner with some age. So I've had many, many experiences. I've known many, many things. And I've seen a lot.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to jump in, or shall we move on? What do you think is the best way you can influence or help a budding young female scientist? Margaret, would you like to start with that one?
Okay, well, this is, these questions have made me think a lot about identity, and that I think, we can be secure in our identity, but that doesn't mean that we belong. Something that I've struggled with is, one, taking myself seriously and, having the insecurity or the courage to speak up. but I think a lot about belonging, and there's this idea of disidentification, that when you find it painful that you're not belonging, that you tend to pull back and say, well, I don't care, I don't want to be part of that group. And it's something that I kind of struggle with is, I know I'm a biologist and I know I'm a scientist, but I don't always feel like I belong. And, you know, at one point I had an epiphany and said, have I wanted to belong? Am I disidentifying because it's painful? Or are there aspects about the culture of science that that I really don't like and don't want to be a part of? I think something that is helpful in overcoming that, and you know, I've mentored female students, I've mentored African American and Latinx students, and I see that they have a certain confidence in their own ability, but the thing that I may have been able to give them is my confidence in their ability to succeed. And so I think someone who's a step farther along in their journey, recognizing and acknowledging people's ability to succeed is important.
Thank you.
Can I jump? I think I want to jump in on that one. Because I think about this a lot in regards to how I can make a substantial difference for young female scientists that are coming behind us. And I think a lot about my parents and how they took a lot and they do a lot and they sacrifice a lot just so it could be better. And so I feel one of the things that I can do that's substantial is to take the punches. And so I'm taking it so I can create opportunities and make it better and create hopefully more equitable situations as they're coming through the pipeline. Not to say it's going to be easy, because science and health is not easy. So I don't want to create a false narrative for them. But definitely, I think it's part of my responsibility to take on some of those challenges. And a lot of it stems from, you know, combating some of those stereotypes. And I think that was alluded to earlier as it relates to, you know, genders in science, and how there's this assumption that even particularly with, you know, little Black girls, that we don't necessarily have that innate ability to do science or be successful. And then also promoting that growth mindset, I think is very important as well. And then also, just as I stated before, just creating a culture where the young women feel supported. And a big part of my life and career has been a part of creating opportunities, whether it's through women in science programs or mentoring, bringing students in the lab, so that they understand that that I have their back and I'm going to advocate for them. And so I hope that I'm making a substantial difference that way.
Thank you.
I'd also like to answer this question. I think that the best way I contribute to making a difference for budding female scientists is really being myself at work. Being out and queer and visibly gender nonconforming. I have a lot of students, mostly women, who end up coming out to me, which is, it's very interesting that happens, but it's because I'm here and people can see me. And then at the same time, I'm working with colleagues and it's maybe the first time they've seen an adult gender nonconforming human, and that's better for the students if my colleagues have seen that. And it's not the first time they see it in their students. And so, yeah, I think that just being there and being myself makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say, certainly we want to, help people through college and advanced degrees. But you can't do that if the student doesn't have a foundation somewhere much earlier in life, somewhere in preschool, somewhere in elementary school. Then it becomes a fallacy to think that you're going to have this, groundswell of girls of color who are going to go into these careers because they didn't make it out of, the high school first. So, I spend my time working with young people in the, high school, possibly elementary school, trying to make a difference. Because if you don't make a difference there, then you're going to have like a handful of people that you can aspire to mentor in college or graduate school. And there are many brilliant young people that we've got to get out of elementary school, we've got to get out of high school so that they can go to college and do well in college and go to grad school and do well in grad school.
Thank you. Okay, here's another question. What's one question you're tired of hearing being a woman in science, and what would you like to say to settle the matter once and for all so you never have to hear that question again? Interesting question. Anybody brave enough to want to jump in on that one?
I think if we can get to the point where the question does not have to be asked, that's what gets on my nerves, that we're still in a state where we have to ask the questions. Like how does it feel to be different? It feels great to be different, right? Like I bring value to the table. So I think a lot of times when we think of that question, it's like, oh, okay, let's think about the disparities and kind of the negative. But I think it points back to what we bring to the table with our diversity and with our experiences. So I just want us to get to the point where we don't have to ask that question. And maybe I'm off, but.
I would just say I'm always amazed when somebody asks me my opinion about anything. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna filter.
How often have you been asked, or have you told a listener what you do, and the response is, "Oh, I hated that subject in high school," or "I hated that subject." How do you respond to that when you hear that question?
Well, usually they say, after I tell them that, I teach chemistry, and then we talk a little bit more and I mention organic, that's the one that they hate. And, I just tell them I did too, but, eventually it clicked. So I just kind of stuck with it and eventually got it.
Usually it's about being a scientist. And so trying to make the argument, like deep down, we're all scientists and just making things relevant. And so I think that's kind of the perspective that I take.
I will say that one thing that I find a horrible mixed blessing is when they say, well, you look pretty good for being a scientist.
Oh gosh. Do you really think men get that question?
Like Lavone, I do a lot of work with students in elementary school and trying to fuel the pipeline. And we did focus groups, and, we were just having conversations with the students, and, we were pointing out individuals in the room, and they just hone in on what they think a scientist looks like. And I don't remember what I was wearing that day, but I think they thought I was either a lawyer or a secretary. And so I just think, that's part of it too, changing the perception of young people as to what scientists look like and who we are.
I know I'm not a panelist, but I have a very short story to share as a female scientist. I gave a talk when I was in graduate school to a bunch of school children about my research. And the very first and only question I got at the end of it was, "Are you engaged?" I was not wearing a ring, but they wanted to know if you could be a scientist and still have a personal life, I guess, a boyfriend, whatever. So I always thought that was kind of eye-opening. I had never occurred to me that a female scientist would be viewed that way by younger children. So here's an easy question. What would you like your legacy to be? Lavonne, would you like to start?
Well, okay. So, I would like to hope that something I did was instrumental in changing the life of young African American children, and that something I did helped to improve their trajectory and their outcomes. So, I pretty much dedicated my career to the health promotion of African American children. And I hope at the end of the day that, it can be said that I made a difference.
Thank you. Patty?
Well, kind of along those lines, I would like to somehow create or impact my community and communities like mine here in Little Village, where there's just a lack of resources in education, just in general, lack of green space. Really, I find hope in like the organizations and people in the community that are fighting every day against these types of injustices. And so I would like to add myself to that group of people, so that, young people and 13-year-old youth from my community can have a chance to, just live.
Thank you. Juanetta.
So one of my favorite lines from James Brown is, I don't need nobody to give me nothing. Open the door and I'll get it myself. And since the first time I heard that when I was young, that always made an impression on me. And from that song, I got the impression that I need to leave the door open for other people. So I would want, or I would hope that my legacy would be that I either opened the door that was closed to me, and then I left it open and I welcomed the next person in.
Thank you. Margaret?
Well, I want to, I'm not sure if I can articulate this, but it's something that Stephanie touched upon and Amanda touched upon, and feedback that I've gotten from students that I've mentored. And Stephanie was talking about balance, work-life balance, and Amanda was talking about bringing her whole self to the job. And I've really tried to encourage students that I've mentored closely to not wait until they meet this milestone or this milestone or this milestone to have a whole life. Because when you get to be president of the university and you haven't thought about what you want your life to be, you're in big trouble. And so I've gotten feedback from students that we had kind of a nice environment in my lab. And then when they went on, it maybe wasn't so nice or so welcoming, but they took that knowledge with them that they should be, developing their whole self as they go along. And so that's something that wasn't intentional on my part, but it's been very gratifying to me to hear that from students that I've worked with. And I think, as Amanda said, when you can be your whole self in any situation, it's going to make things better for everyone and hopefully help with more people with different identities, multiple identities, belonging in science.
Amanda.
Yeah. Well, anyone who's actually talked to me knows that I really like asking questions. and I like pushing for change. And the reason for that is because I like to question the things that we currently do. I think we can do better than we currently do. And, you know, if I'm able to leave a lasting expectation that we question processes and we question traditions to ensure equity and actual inclusion that doesn't require conformity to unrelated cultural standards, I think that would mean that I've done what I wanted. But yeah, that requires asking questions so much. And I think one of those things that I like to ask questions about or push back on is that science exists without bias. And a lot of us here know that's not true, but a lot of people say things like empirical data to suggest that this data was collected with no frame of reference, and that it's not true. It's wildly false, in fact. And so if we recognize that all data has bias and good science seeks to identify those biases and not ignore them and call it objective, I would want that. The things I ended up studying in like social and economic justice, they were science in a way. They were psychology and statistics, linguistics, anthropology. And those things are inextricable from science, but we don't treat them that way. And so when we get around to medicine or healthcare, we have that system still informed by racist ideas of the past, right? So like if your ability to get a kidney transplant is determined by an equation set up by mathematicians, which it is, but it relies on racist stereotypes developed by eugenicists, there is a correction factor for race, suggesting that Black people as a whole are homogenous. And so then they end up less able to get kidney transplants. So we have what we call an unbiased system, or we treat science as an unbiased system. And I think that encouraging people to ask questions about systems makes that more evident. So growing science is asking questions to me. And that's a legacy I want to leave.
Thank you. Stephanie.
So I would think most scientists would probably say they want their legacy to be a pioneer in their field. And for me, as a cancer biologist, it's always been to have some impact in improving perhaps how breast cancer is diagnosed or improving targeted therapies. But at the end of the day, some of the most meaningful impact or legacy that I would like to have would be to bring about change that encourages not just women, but diverse individuals, opportunities to excel in science. And I don't know, just from the time we logged on, really all day, I've been very emotional. And I don't know if it's everything that's happened with the Floyd case, but I got an email just the other day from Jay Tron. He was one of my advisees that graduated a couple of years ago, who was in pharmacy school at UNC Chapel Hill. It's unbelievable because there was a semester where Jay Tron came back and he had been stabbed when he had went home for break. There was another time where he had gone home during another break where he was in the wrong place at the wrong time and was arrested. However, the charges were dropped and it was wiped off his record. However, with those sorts of circumstances, he should not be in pharmacy school right now. And so he emailed me the other day just to thank me, to say, I just got elected to an office in my pharmacy class. And I don't know, for me, that's a legacy that I'm definitely proud of, and I hope to be able to continue.
Thank you. This is really stirring, and I appreciate all your thoughtful responses to these questions. Really educational even for me. So I thought maybe we would turn to questions from our attendees. So if you have if you have a question, if you're attending, please put that in the chat. You can send that to me directly, and then I will target the person on the panel that you might note for your question. Our first question goes to Quinetta. It's a long one. I loved hearing Professor Shelby say that she also had difficulty with her field of study, but at some point it clicked. I feel like I often find myself questioning if I belong. I know I'm intelligent enough to get through this degree, but am I going to be able to do this in a career setting? How do you get past those thoughts and imposter syndrome?
I don't know. You tell me. I still have, episodes where I feel like I don't belong, or I wonder, how did I get here? So the short answer, maybe I'll give you the long one too. The short answer is, I have been, especially in an academic setting, I have been in the room with very intelligent people. And I've just gotten to the point where I try not to say anything, although sometimes I do say something and I kick myself for saying it, because in my mind, I think that what I've just said is not at the level of intelligence that the other people in the room, what they say is. But I try to learn, it's just like, so for example, yesterday I had class and we were looking at an article, and we were looking for how to improve the writing. But we saw this one article and some words that someone used really impressed me. And I thought, oh, I need to write that down, just if I need to write something, I can use that phrase, so I say that to say, if you feel that you're in a situation where you are an imposter, start taking notes and mimic what the other people do.
Can I jump in on that just to follow up? I actually sometimes do that, Quinetta. I think of one of my mentors when I was in college during my first internship. Her name is Griselda, and I always think about her and how would she say something like this? Because I always loved her composure and the way that she spoke, very strong. And so I try to, of course, think of what I'm going to say first, but think about, well, how would she say it? And then try and approach it that way. I don't know.
Has anybody else dealt with the imposter syndrome? And how'd you deal with it? Stephanie?
Yeah, all the time at this very second. But what I've learned and what I always teach my students during orientation sessions, I used to go on stage and I used to have students say, it's okay to fail, because it is okay to fail. That's how we learn, and it creates opportunities for improvement. So every now and then we may say something out of place or that's wrong. The hope and expectation that those that are around us, which is not always the case, because in science, you have people that are cutthroat and they're gonna try to embarrass you. But that's the purpose of creating networks and systems of people of support that are gonna be that one to tap you on your shoulder and say, you know what, great point, but maybe you should think about doing it this way. And so I wanna make sure that people are okay with being okay not to always be perfect, because nobody can live up to those standards, and just learn from it and creating these networks of support like Dr. Shelby.
Margaret, I noticed you shaking your head quite a bit. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Maybe it is helpful to acknowledge that, that's that's out there for a lot of us a lot of the time, and maybe doesn't necessarily correlate to, you know, where you are in your journey. It's a real thing.
Does anybody else have anything to add about the imposter syndrome and how you deal with that?
Well, I think it's important for women, and again, I'm going to go back to, you know, African American women, but women to understand that when they are wherever they are, they're there because they probably were better than anybody else around them. So they are not the imposter in the room. If anything, the others are the imposter in the room. To understand that they got there probably, you know, by qualifications that were far superior than those around them. And it's important not to, you know, as they say, drink the Kool-Aid. Don't let people have you think you're not good enough. You are good enough. And that's why you're there.
Thank you. Here's a general light question. What do you like to do for fun?
Well, I do a lot of kiddie stuff. I have a budding 12-year-old. So whatever 11 and 12-year-old boys do, now we're in a pandemic, so we've been limited a little bit in our activities, but whatever 11, little 12-year-old boys do, that's what I do, and I have fun doing it.
Amanda, what do you like to do for fun?
Oh boy, so many things. Last week we went camping, and that was pretty cool. We went to the dunes and we saw some sandhills cranes, which make a lot of noise, and a great blue heron and some egrets, and that was really cool. So I like to hike and camp. I also recently started throwing pottery on a wheel. So that's interesting. And it's started to involve some chemistry because I'm not happy with the way that the green glaze is coming out. It's coming out way too blue. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how much like copper oxide you need to put in something to make it the right shade of green. So I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Margaret?
Oh, I feel like such a boring person. One of the things that I really enjoy is gardening and my indoor house plants. And Amanda's helped me with some cuttings and things like that. You know, I like to read. I like to sew, but I haven't done it for years until recently when I made some masks, and you know, I thought that was kind of fun. So I'll be thinking about this more since I'm going to be retiring. But you know, this is, you know, developing the whole self and not waiting. You know, I have to say that, you know, I'm not a good follower of my own policies. That you know, I don't currently have a lot of hobbies, but I do have fun. I have fun with my husband.
Quinetta, I know you have a really fascinating hobby people would love to hear about.
Well, I really enjoy cooking, especially things that I've never cooked before. But I am an amateur woodworker. I love to do things with wood. Yeah, I made my kitchen cabinets.
Oh.
Patty?
So I'm a mother of 2 little ones. So for fun these days, I enjoy blowing bubbles and making my almost 2-year-old laugh. And believe it or not, for fun, I like to go to Target because it offers me some time to myself.
Stephanie?
I am a crazy movie watcher. I saw Mortal Kombat is coming out, a new version, 2021. So this past weekend, I made my son watch the 1995 version of Mortal Kombat. So he saw the trailer for the new one, and now he's convinced that the new one is going to be garbage because the 1995 one was so great. So, but I watched movies like crazy. And my dad is a chef. And so I'm a very big foodie. So I like just eating lots of different and good stuff all the time.
Great. Does anybody have any follow-up things they would like to say? We're approaching 12 o'clock. Any final messages for the attendees?
I just want to first thank the panel. When we reached out to everyone, we knew you would hopefully agree, but the immediate response from everyone was absolutely. And the types of information and sentiments and experience that have been shared today, I've learned so much. And I'm probably gonna have to go off camera and cry in a little bit, only because it's just something powerful being around powerful women that understand who they are and their journey and how we're in this to support others. So I thank you for being here today.
I want to share Stephanie's thanks for the panel. You guys were awesome. I just want to read something that somebody posted. Everything was so relevant. Every single thing mentioned was something I can relate to. And thank you all for being some of the most inspiring people in our lives. Thank you. I had goosebumps the entire time. So thank you all. This has been fabulous. For attendees, for more information about the College of Science and Health 10-year anniversary celebration, please visit our website. If you go to the chat, Curtis has posted the website for the events surrounding our 10th anniversary. And we would like to ask you to consider supporting the College of Science and Health. Thank you so much.